Hello everyone, welcome to Hill Street. Today's story is, I keep noticing people making this gesture at me. Now I'm scared for my life. If you end up enjoying this story, please leave a like. And if you enjoy hearing stories from me, please subscribe, become a resident of Hill Street, and let me know how I'm doing in the comments. And I just wanted to say a quick thank you to all of you. We have just recently hit 300 residents, and that is amazing. Thank you all. Now, let's get to this nightmare. So I grew up in a very small countryside town, the kind of place everybody knows each other, and you could pretty much walk from one side of the town to the other in less than a day. There was only one school, which held middle and high school classes all together. There was only one square, which was pretty much the place most kids hang out after school on the weekends, and mountains and forest all around. I think I was about 8 to 9 years old when I consciously noticed a kid I knew had just disappeared. He was not a close friend, but a boy I would see almost every day around school or at the square's playground. And someday I suddenly realized I hadn't seen him around in weeks. When I asked my parents about him, they did not seem to remember who I was talking about. And since I did not know this kid that well, I just shrugged the whole thing aside. The following years, though, I started noticing the same thing repeating itself. It was always around the end of September. One day, a kid would simply stop showing up at school, and then I would never see this kid's face again. And that got me curious, so I started asking questions. That year, I noticed a girl a couple years older than me was gone. I was 13 to 14, and the girl was 16. Since I remembered always seeing her with the same group of teens at the square, I looked for them to see if they knew something. They were not much older than me, but the fact that I was younger probably did not help. They were also sad and mad with the whole disappearance of their friend. So at first, I could not get many answers from them. They basically ended up telling me to screw off, but I kept going after them, every day, cautiously. And finally, this girl, Jen, talked to me. The girl that was gone, Annie, was her friend. Jen was the first one to be bothered by her not showing up. And at the time, we did not have access to cell phones nor the internet. So the only way to get in touch with someone who does not show up was to go to their house. So Jen said she went there and asked Annie's parents, and they just sent her off without telling her anything. The more we thought about it, the stranger it seemed. Imagine, there's a small town, and a kid goes missing, but there's not a big commotion at all. The grown-ups do not talk about it. There is nothing on the local news. Teachers at school do not seem to even notice. Jen noticed all these things I did not even think about before. I mean, in such a small town, I would imagine a big search party and a huge community effort to look for a missing kid, right? But no. Every year a kid was just gone, and nobody seemed to care. At the time, considering we were all in a small, faraway countryside town on top of all, we had no access to computers, and the internet was not something big at all anyways. So, if you needed to look for information, you went to the public library. And the only public library in town was the school's. And it was not a very big or very organized library at all. The most we could get were some old stored regional newspapers. And we could not find any mention of the kids that disappeared the years before. We kept investigating and learned the names of some of the missing kids. Jen had the idea to try and find their parents. One of them, Shirley, might have had some information, we thought. But after finding and talking to them, things just got weirder. Look, they could have denied all, right? Billy, never heard of him. Or they could have made up some lie. Oh, little Susie? She went to live with her granny in the big city. But no. All the parents we talked with did the same. They just avoided the subject, neither confirming nor denying the very existence of a missing kid in the first place. I mean, yeah, it made some sense. The kids had nothing to say about the disappearance of their friends, and eventually just ignored it all, because their parents probably acted like this. Their parents just shrugged it off, and were just vague and unconcerned. At least we could confirm the existence and disappearance of their friends, but they just did not worry about it so much. Jen and I were the weird ones. I noticed there were no pictures of the missing kids at any of the parents' houses, but it was Jen who told me that a lot of the parents looked weirdly nauseated when we asked them about them, and almost always would hug their bellies or touch their mouths. A whole year went by, and we got nothing, losing momentum and eventually stopped investigating at all as the time went by without any answer. But Jen and I kept talking to each other and became friends. When the next September came by, I noticed Jen getting a little weird. She seemed anxious, worried. Whenever I asked her if there was something wrong, she would just shrug it off. But as the days went by, she started to look worse. By the point she was actually acting paranoid and avoiding leaving her house. I was so worried that one night I went to Jen's house and climbed to her room's window. She was a mess, and I told her I would not leave until she told me what was going on. Jen seemed to really not want to talk about it, but eventually caved in. And she told me she thought that people were after her. When I asked who, she just told me, people. She said she noticed them around town, just looking at her, and when they crossed their eyes, these people would make a gesture at her, and then she reproduced the gesture at me. While looking straight into my eyes, she rolled her tongue out and touched the tip of it using her right index finger. After making the gesture, she started sobbing and did not say anything else. I just kept there hugging her in silence until the birds started chirping outside. When I left, I looked back and waved goodbye to her at the window. And that was the last time I saw her. I did not notice it at all, or more probably, they hid it very well. But my parents were very worried about me. The things I said, the whole investigation stuff, and you can imagine how much worse I was after Jen disappeared. By October, during the same year, my parents had already arranged for us to move to another city. By December, we were gone. Somehow, I felt like they were trying to protect me. Anyway, I never noticed how good we had it until we moved out. I don't even remember getting sick at any point in my life before we moved. We could always eat whatever we wanted. All the kids I knew had the toys they wanted. But after we moved out, we struggled with bills, had to save money for food, and my mom was actually hospitalized for days because of a disease. Things were just harder. But that's just how things are in the big city, right? Well, my parents are gone now. My father had lung cancer. My mother recently passed away from cardiac arrest. Her blood pressure got very bad over the years, and I'm kinda screwed. I have not got much money and cannot really pay the rent for the crappiest place out there. But we never sold our house in our hometown, and I ended up inheriting it. So, it was a roof over my head, at least, right? So here I am once more, back in my hometown. And not much has changed over here. The place is still great. The air is pure. And I cannot wonder how, but the internet reception is great, even though we were in the middle of nowhere. The problem is, I'm a little paranoid. Now that you know about my childhood, you can imagine why. And you see, lately, every time I go outside, I see them. People, random people around town. They just stare at me. And whenever we cross eyes, they roll out their tongues and touch the tip of it with their right index finger.